That's the role of these poems I'm exposing us to take individual narratives about Israelites, Hannah, Deborah, Barak, or even David. But these poems all ratchet everything up, pick it up a notch. And this story now becomes a new Adam and Eve rescued from the waters placed in the garden. Good evening, happy after the Sabbath days, and shalom, shalom. Welcome back to Study the Bible Not the Sermon TV. If this is your first time here, welcome to where we have come to understand strange Bible stories. And if you move by something you see, hear, or read while you're here, do me a favor, smash that like button, hit the subscribe, and then slide on our notifications bell. And if you're a regular here, please drop me a comment so I can shout you out on the next joint. And to the homie Thomas Washington, 1114, I appreciate your attention to the important matters that I discussed here on this playlist. Homie 100. Now tonight, these poems are a way of taking the narrative that you just read and kicking everything up a notch into a cosmic type melody that reminds you of the cosmic type storyline of the whole biblical narrative. That's the role of these poems I'm exposing us to take individual narratives about Israelites, Hannah, Deborah, Barak, or even David. But these poems all ratchet everything up, kick it up a notch. And this story now becomes a new Adam and Eve rescued from the waters placed in the garden. Adam and Eve kind of blew it, but God is gracious in helping them do a mop-up job. And like I say, with these other people we read, it's just going to ratchet everything up. So these poems play a really, really important role. Now, Jonah says, I called out to you, help, sinking down to the bottom. I'm dead. Yahweh rescues me. My prayer was heard. And the last line of the poem / prayer becomes the takeaway or the moral of the story of Jonah, with the temple mentioned twice. So let's dig into it and see how God initiatives bring us to the water scenes. Jonah chapter 2, verse 1. And it says, Then Jonah prayed unto the Lord his God out of the fish's belly and said, I cried by reason of my affliction unto the Lord. And he heard me out of the belly of hell, cried I, and thou heardest my voice. For thou hadst cast me into the deep in the midst of the seas and the floods. And the floods compassed me about, all thy billows and thy waves passed me over. So the prayer starts out, Jonah speaking to the Lord, or Yahweh, I and thou. Then the first flood scene, he was cast into the deep, deaf waters. He's on a road back to nothingness. Now drop down to verse 5 for the second flood scene. The waters compassed me about, even to the soul. The depth closed me round about. The weeds were wrapped around my head. I went down to the bottom of the mountains. The earth with her bars was about me forever. Yet hast thou brought up my life from corruption, O Lord, my God. You should notice how the first and the last line of the water scenes match because they describe God's actions. In verse 3, he was cast into the deep by God. He begins to sink. At the end of the sinking, at the bottom of the mountains that are under the water, at his lowest point, when he done hit rock bottom, literally and literarily, in the end of verse 6, Yahweh raises his life back up from the pit. And just when he thought the bars of the watery dungeon were forever, Yahweh lifts him up. And not just Genesis 1 verse 2. By the time you get to the life of Jonah, Genesis 1 v2 has been built on and developed. And you should have all of those water scenes on your mind. When Israel came out of Egypt, Exodus 15, the Song of Moses, describes the Egyptians as following this same sinking pattern. In verse 4, they are cast into the sea, even though technically they rode chariots into the sea. The same way Jonah said God cast him into the sea, but technically the sailors threw him over. Then in Exodus 15, verse 5, and again in verse 10, the Egyptians sank to the bottom in a similar way, poetically, as Jonah. I don't think Jonah is in his own poem likening himself to the Egyptians. I do think that the author of the book and the organizer of the story does want us to see Jonah as filling the same slot as the Egyptians, as the anti-hero, the rebel against God's will. The Egyptians were futile in their attempts to go against God, just as the man of God is now here making vain attempts to evade God and rebel. Check it out at verse 7. When my soul fainted within me, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came in unto thee into thy holy temple. They that observe lying vanities forsake their own mercy, but I will sacrifice unto thee with the voice of thanksgiving. I will pay that I vow. Salvation is of the Lord. I think we're supposed to laugh when Jonah says salvation is of the Lord. Like nowadays, we be thinking second resurrection and all of that. But he is literally in the mouth of death. He is to be saved right now. He needs to be saved right now. The irony is who he is actually being chased by. He's being chased by the God who has the salvation. And this quote is actually from Psalms chapter 3. David actually was on the run from thousands of soldiers in need of God's salvation. While here, the prophet again pursued by none other than Yahweh. Shaking my head. But either way, the prophet Jonah lived during the reign of Amaziah, king of Judah, son of Joash, king of Judah. Because his name is mentioned in 2 Kings 14. So he definitely grew up meditating on all the things we've talked about in this series so far. Check us out next week when we're going to dig into Exodus 15. We talked about Exodus 14 before, about Israel walking on dry ground. Next week, though, Exodus 15, which is the poetical retelling that we call a Song of Moses. Just in case you want to read ahead, go ahead and share this video, because right now, we up.